Hello, my name is Brother Jeff, and you're in the heart of Northeast Denver, 5 Points. I'm a community organizer and a leader, and I'm happy to show you our community. If you think about the history of 5 Points in Northeast Denver, this was known as the Harlem of the West at the turn of last century. This was a place where Billie Holiday performed, Duke Ellington performed, all of your major jazz greats. You had incredible poets. This was an onswell of just cultural activity. It was the hub of the black community from here all the way to Chicago, or from here all the way to Los Angeles. If we start thinking about some of the housing covenants that came down in the 70s, you started seeing a migration of individuals outside of this community who had the means to leave. And then when you started to move into the 80s, you started to experience a great decline based on drugs particularly, and the loss of jobs had an incredible impact on those who were working their way through a job system or an economic system that had a bottom rung. Well, the bottom rung was pulled out. And then when the drugs came in, you saw an intense decline in this community around the late 80s, early 90s, to where this was practically a war zone. And so when I began doing work along with others, we first envisioned like safe places, which is Brother Jeff's Cultural Center, but then there's also an African American research library that's here in the community that I was involved in helping bring to fruition. And that library captures the history of African Americans in the West. It's an incredible facility, and people come from all around the country to learn about our rich heritage. And so when you think about some of the things that have been done, and then the changing of the community, you're in the midst of a resurgence. But that resurgence doesn't necessarily include fully the African American community or people who are locked outside of the economic means to participate. And so I'm very interested in making sure that as this community flourishes, as this community thrives, as this community becomes the place where everyone from everywhere comes to experience, that they will also see that there are people here that are represented at all economic levels, from all backgrounds, etc. We don't want this to just be a high-end community that had a history of has-beens and used-to-bes. And so as such, we are creating programs, and we are also creating a network of people who are making sure that everyone is included.
Well, I like working with Brother Jeff for a number of reasons. Well, he's a mainstay in the community, so he's been here for a lot of years. So his influence is very deep. There's not an area when we think about the culture in Denver, when we think about hip hop, when we think about poetry, when we think about arts in general and education and literacy, he has deep influences in those areas. He's helped many children go to school, further their education. I think we have 3 or 4 people who are, if they don't have their doctorate already, are on the road to getting their doctorate. These are kinds of things that he makes inroads that most people don't see.
I remember growing up in a neighborhood that was full of laughter. My world changed, particularly when I saw young people, my friends, my peers, being killed based on drugs, gangs, and violence. And as people began to think what is wrong and what is going on and what needs to be done, all I knew was that it was time to roll up my sleeves and be involved and be engaged. So I'm engaged from a very personal standpoint. I had a long background in the music industry, hip hop in particular, and traveled the country with groups such as Public Enemy, Ice-T, Ice Cube, promoting, doing records, etc. And I was able to look into a lot of communities, and I began to notice at one point that there were similar actions happening in every place I went as it related to guns, drugs, and violence. Young people were killing each other in inner cities across the country. And so I gave up the music industry and totally immersed myself in stopping the killing. And I used those same skills I learned as a producer as a community organizer. And so what I realized is that there are transferable skills as opposed to as it relates to connecting individuals, pulling together resources, and creating environments where people want to get involved and want to participate. And as such, the money, the physical money, the wealth went away, but the passion continued, and as such the resources began to make themselves available again. And I've been able to learn that it's not necessarily the money that drives people with passion. It's the passion that attracts resources and finances that may not be marked by a fancy car or the latest gadget, but the pleasure or the feeling one gets when changing and touching a life. Those are things that I believe are also transferable as we think of wealth. So when I talk to young people, I let them know that it is, of course, good to get the resources you need to live the life that you want to live, but you don't have to perhaps sell your soul or give away everything you have for material trappings. There's a lot of wealth in doing community work, being of service, and making a world that's beautiful for everyone to live in.